Hello, welcome to the NorthStar Controller point-to-multipoint LSP Learning Byte. I'm Gordon Mosley with the Education Services Department at Juniper Networks. Let's get started. After successfully completing this learning byte, you will be able to use the NorthStar Controller to provision point-to-multipoint label switch paths. A point-to-multipoint label switch path has a single ingress node and several egress nodes. The NorthStar Controller, when you create a point-to-multipoint label switch path, the NorthStar Controller creates what are called sub-label switch paths that are grouped together to form the point-to-multipoint label switch path. A common use case for point-to-multipoint label switch paths is in the broadcast TV market. The example here, you have a sporting event going on and there's cameras everywhere and it feeds back into a broadcast truck. And then from that broadcast truck to distribute the data from site back to production or back to headquarters, the broadcast truck would pair with more than one service provider router, and it would stream the data. The service provider responsibility would be to create two point-to-multipoint label switch paths. You see, I can't, as a broadcast TV provider, stand single points of failure because people are watching. And so I make use of two point-to-multipoint label switch paths. In this example, the red label switch path stops or has an egress point at each customer site, and the blue label switch path does the same thing going in the other direction. So if I lose a single link, if I lose a single node, at least the other point-to-multipoint label switch path can continue feeding a video stream. This is also commonly used in the financial services market to stream real-time market data. The NorthStar Controller uses the netconf protocol to provision any point-to-multipoint LSPs that it tries to signal. So one of the requirements is that on your MPLS ingress nodes for your point-to-multipoint label switch paths, netconf must be enabled in the local configuration file. And also inside of the NorthStar Controller device profile entry access tab, netconf must be enabled, right? So we don't use PSEP to provision point-to-multipoint label switch paths. We use netconf. So this is a requirement for point-to-multipoint label switch path provisioning. This is the example network I'm going to use during the demonstration. I have probably the most interesting nodes for us are the VMX1 and the VMX2 nodes that you see on either side of this diagram. I already have a point-to-multipoint label switch path from the VMX2 node to all of the other nodes in the network. And what I'm going to demonstrate is building a second point-to-multipoint label switch path from VMX1 to have it egress at every other node in this network diagram. I'm going to connect to the NorthStar Controller interface and demonstrate this now. This is the NorthStar Controller administrative interface, and I have added to the network info pane the point-to-multipoint group tab. This does not display by default. So in your environment, you'll have to click the plus and then add the point-to-multipoint group tab to the network info pane. And here's my VMX2 to VMX1 point-to-multipoint label switch path. And by selecting it, I can view the path of all of the sub-label switch paths that I have in my network. Now, I can right-click on this and view the sub-label switch paths. It will really take me to a filtered view of the network info pane tunnel tab, where I can just see the point-to-multipoint sub LSPs that were built. So for example, here's the one from VMX1 to VMX2, VMX2 to P1, VMX2 to P2. So you see all of the sub label switch paths that make up this point-to-multipoint label switch path. So now what I want to do is just demonstrate making another one. So I'm going to click the add button. I'm going to give it a name. In this case, I'm just going to call it VMX1 to VMX2. You can assign a prefix. The sub LSPs are automatically named with a PCE underscore name. You can change that prefix. For example, I can come in and say, P2MP. You can put whatever you'd like. I'm going to reserve some bandwidth. I'm going to reserve, 10 megs of bandwidth for, oops, that's too many zeros in there. Get that straightened out. 10M for 10 megabits of bandwidth. I'm going to provision it. It will be signaled using RSVP. And I simply will specify the node A, the ingress node for this point-to-multipoint label switch path. And then I'll specify the egress node. Probably the simplest way is if I click the plus button, it will add every single node in the network. Now by doing that, I need to take VMX1 out of the list so I can select it and hit the minus symbol to remove it. I can't build a label switch path to myself, so it would fail to provision that. I can also click the little circular icon. It really is a globe. And then I can, once I click that, I can go select nodes on the topology map to add them to the list. So whatever mode you prefer, I can go into the advanced tab and configure some routing parameters, for example, administrative groups or diversity groups that I would like these label switch path computation to take into account. I can go into the design tab and route these things based on some other value besides the IGP shortest path. And what's a very nice feature for people in the broadcasting space, remember the game doesn't come on until Saturday at noon, right? So I don't need this label switch path right now. I can schedule this. And so we can have the point to multi-point label switch path come up a couple hours before the game. That gives the broadcast customer time to work, their side of the equation up. And then once the game is over, we can schedule this label switch path to be torn down. And these point to multi-point label switch paths are mapped to multicast signaled, BGP signaled multicast VPN in the service provider network to give us some multi-tenancy, so I can have multiple broadcast TV customers using my service provider WAN network. And so I can define some attributes that can be used to map this point to multi-point LSP to a BGP signaled multicast VPN. Now, so I'm going to go back to the properties tab. I'd like 10 megs of bandwidth to be reserved for this, please. Here's my ingress node and my egress nodes. Other than that, I'm going to click submit. All right, and I'll see it appear in the point to multi-point group tab. Here's my new label switch path. Now, what I will notice about this label switch path is that when I click on it, I don't see the path. Like I did when I clicked on the point to multi-point label switch path from VMX2 to VMX1. And that's because when you use netconf to signal to provision a label switch path, PCEP doesn't pay attention to it. And so I don't get real-time status information about the path and is this label switch path up? Now I can see it in other places. I can right-click on this label switch path, say view the sub label switch paths, and I can see, hey, these paths are active. But when I click on them, I don't actually see the path instantiated on the topology map. So there's another step I need to perform. I need to perform what's called a netconf collection. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go to the administration, the more options menu, administration option. And then under device collection, I'm going to start a netconf device collection process. And that will tell the NorthStar controller to connect out to the devices on your network using netconf, and it will execute a series of CLI commands on those nodes. And one of the CLI commands would be show MPLS LSP, and I can pull statistics and learn about the label switch paths on my network that have been provisioned using the netconf protocol. Now it usually takes a couple minutes for this task to complete. So while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to go back to the topology map, and we'll take a little bit more look, a little deeper look at these label switch paths. I've shown you how you can right-click on the label switch path and view the sub-LSPs that are grouped together to make up this point to multi-point label switch path. I can also select the point to multi-point tree view option, and it will display it kind of more of a graphical fashion for me. I can collapse and expand. So if I want to collapse a group, maybe these are the West Coast nodes in my point to multi-point label switch path. And you can see how the little circle turns a little bit darker. That lets me know that I can click and expand something under this particular section of this output. So that's called the point to multi-point tree view, where you can graphically see the point to multi-point label switch path represented. Now, hopefully my netconf configuration or my netconf collection task has terminated. It looks like it has. So now I have enough information about this label switch path that I can view, on the topology map, the label switch paths that were created. I can now right-click on this point to multi-point LSP and view the sub-LSPs. And as I select them, I see the individual sub-LSPs path through my network. Now, since these label switch paths were provisioned using the netconf protocol, I can view these label switch paths inside of the VMX1 node's configuration. So I'm going to connect to the VMX1 node and demonstrate this. Okay, this is the VMX1 node. I can run show configuration protocols MPLS, and I will see the point-to-multipoint label switch path. Here's the one from VMX1 to 2, from VMX1 to P1, and I can, here's all the label switch paths. Here are the paths objects that were automatically created for the sub LSPs. So again, using the netconf protocol, these label switch paths were actually provisioned in the VMX1 device's local configuration file. So I can run a show MPLS LSP, view all of the operational state of the point-to-multipoint label switch paths for which the VMX1 device is an ingress node. In this learning byte, we use the NorthStar Controller to provision a point-to-multipoint label switch path. Thank you very much.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Network's certification program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.